You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda, hosted by two teachers who break down a different propaganda song each episode. Today, we're talking about Duplicate Keys Icaro, track 12 from the sixth full-length LP, Failed States. And Greg and I agree that it's incredibly important that everyone listen to Chris Hanna's two-part Duplicate Keys Icaro podcast episode available on Patreon.
Absolutely. Chris's episodes that he did about this. So he did his essay where he essentially wrote a story of his life. And then he did the second part of the episode, which was a Q&A where all the people who listened to and loved that episode wrote in questions. And then he talked about duplicate keys in more detail. So those are absolutely essential pieces of listening for any fans out there who haven't heard that. And I would say, pause what you're listening to right now and go listen to that instead, because Chris did such an incredible job on that. What do you think about those?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, the first scripted episode that almost plays like a Radiolab podcast with sound effects, with atmosphere, with this incredible narrative that I've listened to more than once. It's really, really, really powerful.
Yeah, and I'm on the Patreon, and I'm supporting it at a really high tier that comes with written transcriptions. And last week, I sat down with that episode and I read it and listened to it at the same time. So I had headphones and I had the printed transcript in front of me, and so it was like an audio book essentially,
Nice. Yeah.
with the script in front of me, and it was just it's transcendent. So everybody go listen to that for sure. So today we're talking about Duplicate Keys Icaro, and this is a closing track. Chris has stated on his show that all of their closing tracks are meant to sort of leave it all on the field, and this one, Duplicate Keys, does it and then some. I don't exactly know how I rank this song against my other two favorite closers by Propaganda, which are Iteration and Purina Hall of Fame. But this and those other two songs are my favorite three Propaganda album closers. Do you agree with my top three album closers?
Yeah, yes. We're going to kind of echo each other, maybe a little bit too much, but the word epic I know is overused, but that still seems like an understatement in describing all three of them, but especially this song, which, if you didn't know, is about ayahuasca ceremonies that Chris has taken part in over the years. And that raw data sphere of pure information is accessing the normally inaccessible parts of the human brain, which then shows you the vision so astonishing, preposterous, impossible, or you can just watch the movie Altered States and get an idea of that as well.
Nice.
So Greg, can you tell the audience what is special about this episode?
Okay, yes, I am absolutely pumped on this episode because we have two guests. This is an epic episode, and I'm reusing your epic there, so I apologize. But we have two guests, and so as listeners know now, we have super fans of the band on now and then. Not every episode, but often as we can, to talk about their favorite song. So I have this dream musicians list of guests, and for this show that I want to have on to talk about how propaganda inspires them. And I love getting folks who understand music and playing music to describe exactly what impresses and allures them about the musical aspect of this band, because they're special. And so our first guest on the Duplicate Keys Icaro episode is Ben Murray, and he sings and plays guitar for the punk rock band Heart Sounds, and he also plays drums in the metal band Like This City. And I am a massive fan of the band Heart Sounds, who has records out on Creator Destructor Records and Epitaph Records. Heart Sounds is freaking amazing, and I'll defend that on any hill. I love all of their records, and my favorite Heart Sounds record is called Internal Eyes, but their other records, Until We Surrender, Drifter, and Dualistic Nihilist, are all absolutely fantastic. So if you are listening and you haven't heard the band Heart Sounds, I mean, just literally toss on any song. My favorite songs by them are Afterthought and Total Separation of Self from Internal Eyes. Another favorite of mine is Slave to a Heart That Strays from the album Until We Surrender. And I absolutely love the song Uncomfortably Numb, which is the one that I showed you.
Yeah.
And there's also another song called Elements. And Uncomfortably Numb and Elements are from the album Drifter. And what's really cool is that Jason Cruz from Strung Out sings a guest vocal line on the song Elements. So Ben also plays drums in Light the City, who has a new-ish record called Terminal Bloom, which is fantastic. And my favorite song on that record is called Grotesque Reflection. It's fantastic. Heart Sounds and Light the City also feature vocals from Laura Nickel as well, and she's fantastic in both bands. So Ben has so many projects. He runs a record label called Creator Destructor Records, who have put out some amazing records from bands like Atlas Losing Grip, Anchors, Cleave, Western Settings, tons more. And he also has a brand new solo record under the moniker No Chemistry, and he has a record out right now. So Ben's awesome. So what do you think about our first guest in this episode, Ben Murray?
That sounds like he has the music pretty much covered. He'll be able to give some insight that maybe you and I won't be able to speak too much on.
Yes. So do you want me to tell you about our second guest as well?
Who's that?
So our second guest on this episode is Chris Hanna from Propagandy.
You don't say.
I do say, and I'm pretty pumped about it. So the reason Chris is here for this episode, besides the fact that he wrote the song we're discussing and he founded the band this show is about, is because I had such a visceral reaction to his Duplicate Keys Icaro Part 1 episode so deeply.
I know what you mean.
And I know that many listeners who have also heard Chris's Duplicate Keys Icaro podcast loved it just as much as I did and just as much as you did, because we all wrote in all those follow-up questions on his Patreon page, and that's what he did Part 2 on. And my question was, Chris, how do you rank Duplicate Keys Icaro on your entire catalog? And he goes, oh, this is a good one. So I know this is a song that's near and dear to him. And his Duplicate Keys Icaro podcast 2-part series was so good. But I had so many follow-up questions that about his experiences with ayahuasca ceremonies that I tracked him down, and he was gracious enough to chat with me about this song, Duplicate Keys Icaro, but also mostly about his experiences of ayahuasca ceremonies. So we talked to Ben from Heart Sounds about the music and like the riffs and the lyrical writing and the vocal melodies and the drumming on this song. So we talked about the technical aspect with Ben. But on my interview with Chris, you get to hear him talk about what it was like to sit in a basement with people during an ayahuasca trip. So we have two great guests, and I am just delighted.
Yeah, we have a big episode going on here. So let's hear from Ben Murray of Heart Sounds and Light the City and No Chemistry about touring, writing, and his love of the song Duplicate Keys Icaro.
Ben Murray, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to talk about this band.
This is a delight to have you here. Can you maybe just introduce to the audience some of your projects that you have in your life? Because you are quite a musician, a businessman. You've got all kinds of projects in the work. What do you want to tell people about what you do?
Yeah. I started my career with a metal band called Light This City. And then after 4 records, started the punk band Heart Sounds and did 4 records with that. And that's the band that toured with Propaganda, which I'll speak on later. Yeah, I run a label called Creator Destructor Records since 2006, and it's mostly metal stuff, mostly heavy metal, death metal, thrash, all that stuff, and some punk releases. And I just released a quote unquote solo record under the name No Chemistry, and that's like it's like a slower version of Hard Sounds, kind of with more Springsteen element influence.
Nice. When did you start writing that No Chemistry stuff?
Like 2 years ago. Yeah, it's been a while, but first record, you always want to make sure how it sounds, how you want to release it. So
Nice. So you kind of started working that after Dualistic Nihilist. Is that the kind of the transition that you went through there?
no, after that last Hard Sounds record, Light This City got back together for
Oh, that's right.
like a reunion record after 10 years of being broken up. And so me and Ryan from that band wrote that record, and then I started writing this one again. I kind of switch off writing heavy stuff and not heavy stuff.
Perfect. Well, that's, you get to scratch every itch that way, and you get to kind of explore different sounds and see what comes out. It's a really pretty cool life that you've got carved out for yourself there in music. I love it.
Thanks, man.
So, yeah, well, and I'm a huge fan as well. Like I'm a massive Hard Sounds fan, so it's a real pleasure to have you on here because you're one of my go-to bands on my long runs whenever I'm training for marathons and stuff. So you're in my ears all the time. So it's awesome to have you here, and we get to geek out about Propaganda. So Ben, how did you find Propaganda? When did they come into your life?
Like most other Fat and Epitaph bands and Nitro bands and all that, my older brother introduced me to that stuff when I was like 12, and he's 3 years older. So he was 15. All his friends were into all the skate punk stuff. And that's back when Propaganda was a skate punk band or
Yeah.
ska punk band or whatever. But yeah, just the older brother thing. He helped me out. He paved the way.
Do you remember what year that was?
Yeah, it was like it had to have been like 99 or 2000.
Okay, so what was the first record did you hear? Do you remember what if it was How to Clean Everything or Less Talk More Rock?
It was How to Clean Everything. Yeah,
Nice.
there was this record store called Record Exchange in this town called Burlingame, half an hour south of San Francisco, and I remember seeing that cover in the glass case, and I was like, that looks fun, and so yeah, that was the first one.
Nice. And then you open it up and you start listening to it and you're like, wow, there's actually like ideas on here and vocabulary that I have to look up and, bust out the dictionary to find out what all this means.
Yeah, they seem to be like the thinking man's fat band,
Yeah, it's like whenever I watch that old Bad Religion live at the Palladium DVD and they're interviewing the people in line outside and they're like, yeah, I have to like go on the internet and do some research and find out what all these vocabulary words mean. So for me, it was like Bad Religion and Propaganda were those two bands where I was like having to like legitimately bust out dictionaries to find out what the words meant. And it's nice because it takes the listening experience to a new level, and it like presents an intellectual challenge for the listener, which is just more than like singing songs about girls and stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the records that hold up the best are the ones that have more kind of like intelligent content. But yeah, Bad Religion too. I have a Recipe for Hate tattoo right here.
Oh, sweet.
But,
Skyscraper, best song.
Yeah, strung out tattoo. That was my upbringing, all that stuff.
Yeah, I see the Astrolux tattoo there on your arm. I did the VIP experience for the Strung Out tour last fall for Armor and Devotion whenever they were in Toronto. So I got to like hang out inside the Opera House and do a bunch of pictures with the whole band and talk to RJ a lot about the new record and playing drums. So that was really fantastic.
Nice. If you ever do a Strung Out podcast, you can invite me back on. Because
I will, absolutely.
I'll talk your ears off. Yeah.
Nice. So Ben, how did you realize that you like loved Propaganda? Like, what was that? Because you hear a band for the first time and it's like, wow, this is really cool, and then you start diving deeper into it. But when did you sort of like take it to the next level and realize that there was something really special here about this particular band?
Yeah, you know what's interesting is like I was more of a casual listener. Like I listened to, Today's Empires and Potemkin City Limits also, when they came out. And I remember enjoying them and all that, and really liking them and distinguishing them from the rest of the bands in that genre as having something else going on that was much more significant.
Hmm.
But it wasn't until Supporting Cast came out in '09, I believe, when I was in college, that it just like blew my brain open with like what you can sound like as a punk band, or a melodic fast punk band, what you could do. That kind of just blew my mind. Yeah. So that's
Mm.
when I honestly like went back to Potemkin and Today's Empires, um, pretty hard, and Let's Talk More Rock and How to Clean Everything. They're nostalgic, but I don't go back to them and listen to them. You
Hmm.
know, I'm sure Chris would say the same.
Hmm.
But yeah. So I think it's when Supporting Cast came out that I was like, Jesus Christ, like this is one of the best bands on the planet, and
Yeah.
a lot of their influences really came to the surface, whether they've been there all along or not. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I was on Twitter earlier today, and we got sort of like a little bit of attention to the podcast on Twitter earlier today, and somebody said supporting cast 10 out of 10 record. And so I think that that was a lot of people's moment when they realized that there's so much more life in the band. I mean, that was because Chris always describes Potemkin City Limits as like this commercial flop, but then they come back with supporting cast and a second guitar player, and then just blew the doors off the place. And I'm so glad whenever I hear people say that, like, that record just lit this fire essentially within them as a listener again.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, and you could see signs of it on Potemkin City Limits. Like you could see, even though Chris, like interestingly, like um shows a lot higher pitched vocal lines for most of that album. Like he's
Hmm.
stretching his voice really high. And I'm sure after touring on that, he was like, well, I'm going to tone that down. But
Yeah.
I think his delivery on Supporting Cast and the following records like serve his voice perfectly. And, obviously like the production was the best at so far, and it was just like perfect production. I still think it's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
And and just the songwriting and starting the record with Todd, and just like all these bold moves that kind of caught you off guard, and the samples throughout the record, the slaughterhouse samples, like all this shit where it's real next level. So yeah, I think that's what. And I think they just got also more active that after that record, like they started touring more when they got Beeve and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice. So Ben, I found your band Heart Sounds whenever Until We Surrender came out. Like, I found you guys like pretty much right away, and I followed you through Drifter and Internal Eyes, and so I'm curious, like, where in the process you guys had the opportunity to tour with Propaganda and go out on the road in support of their band.
It was our last tour ever.
Oh,
Because the band's like not functioning anymore.
right.
But yeah, it was literally we did the Propaganda tour when they were supporting Victory Lap right after it came out, and so it was late 2017. So honestly, it was one of the things that like put my head at ease with like slowing down or stopping the band, because it was the last thing on my checklist that I wanted to do with the band. Like we played with Bad Religion, we toured with Strung Out, Wilhelm Scream, all the bands that made me want to start Heart Sounds. So
Mm.
Propaganda was the icing on the cake when we got that invite. So I, needless to say, I had seen them numerous times and freaked the fuck out every time. And to watch them every night was like insane.
Nice. What do you remember about the tour? How many dates was that tour?
It was only 4 shows. We just did the East Coast part of that run with Iron Sheik and Propaganda. And yeah, I mean, what do I remember? I remember feeling like a kid on Christmas, first
Mm.
off. And then, you know, I had met Chris before at a fest like 5 years before that or something. And he was super nice. And we knew each other a little bit because he emailed me out of nowhere in 2010 to ask about Epitaph, because
Mm.
Epitaph had reached out to them. and to ask me about our experience. And, I gave them positive reviews, obviously, because they're a great label. But that was out of nowhere. So that blew my mind when he emailed. I was like, what the fuck is this guy doing, reaching out? And how does he even know about this band? He said he looked at the Epitaph site and found like the few punk bands and messaged them,
Wow.
off with their heads and stuff like that. But yeah, so I was already like, friendly with him, but just by the time we toured with them, like a super fan, so I knew every night anything they played, I was going to fucking love.
Nice.
So that's a dope feeling. That's rare when you go see a band where you're like, I don't give a fuck what you play. I'm stoked.
Yeah. So what, do you remember what cities those were in?
Yeah, it was Brooklyn, Philly, Boston, and motherfucker, I can't believe I'm not remembering this. I had the laminate right over here. And of
Nice.
course,
Bust it out.
But it was one other city.
Awesome.
It was DC.
Oh, sweet. So
yeah.
did all four of those shows like go off? Were those all just great shows for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, they were sold out immediately, and it was like a 3-band bill. So, with that, when it's a 3-band tour, you get like an hour of doors, which allows for a sold out show. The room's going to be packed. It's kind of, that going in. So, yeah, the energy was just great. The people were really stoked to see a fast band open up, because then Iron Sheik played it after us, and that was like a nice balance of like mid-tempo, sandwiched between faster bands. And so, yeah, I think we were a good band to open that up in terms of energy, just something melodic and fast.
Nice. Well, Ben, I'm curious about the logistics of a tour like that. So you live in the Bay Area in California, but you're playing these shows like thousands of miles away on the other side of the country. How do you, as a band, get yourselves there? Like, did you drive your van and all the gear all the way? Like, tell me about that business aspect of it. It's just, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. No, Heart Sounds at some point, our old band Light the City toured full time, like in a van all the time, like 8 months a year. And Heart Sounds would do things like we do tours here and there, small ones, and we'd do them wherever, and we would just fly out and rent a backline and rent a van. There's this great company, Green Vans, on the East Coast. So we just called them, got a van, and what we did? I mean, we would have flown to fucking Afghanistan to play with Papiani. Like, I would have dropped everything. A lot of bands might not have been able to like fly out and do a tour like that, but I just knew we'd do whatever. So, you put the expenses on a credit card, you pay back what you make, and then you inevitably take a huge loss. But what the fuck, man? I mean, that's like a vacation,
It's life,
so,
it's a life experience.
Yeah, of course. I'll make it happen no matter what. So it's easier. I think for the gear, we got a kit from SJC because they always hook us up. And for like the amps and stuff, we literally bought used gear at Guitar Center, like the shit we play, and then we just have it on the East Coast as like an East Coast backline for any tours. So we're just like, oh fuck it, it's an investment,
Wow, amazing. Okay, cool. So do you have any other like specific memories on that tour that like involving Propaganda, like, or anybody in the band, of like moments like during the tour where something like special happened that sort of lingers with you and you're like, man, I am just lucky to be alive. I'm so glad I have this memory. Does anything like that ring your like stand out to you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, without sounding corny, like honestly, like every minute of the night once we got to the venue was just like, I was just taking it all in like a fiend, I was just like, and none of us would punish them and like bother them, and they're super sweet. They're all sweethearts. But the things I really remember is like, Jord would he's like the big pot smoker in the band, so we bonded immediately, and just like every night once we got there, he'd be like, you want to blast off? And that's what he calls smoking weed. I don't know if it's a Canadian thing or not, but I've started saying it since then. But we would smoke together like every night and like, shoot the shit. And, Chris would hang sometimes, but a lot of times he had his earbuds in. I imagine listening to some podcasts. I was projecting. I was like, I bet he's learning things while I'm just like getting wasted, fucking smoking weed. But Sue Lynn and Todd are super nice. They hung out a bunch. I mean, they're super friendly, but they're also older than us. They're in their mid 40s, and so it's just like it's touring for them is different. They're not like raging every night and all
Right.
that. Yeah, but
Nice.
they played phenomenally every night, and watching from the side stage and the sound checks and all that. It's just it's a party every night. It's super fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have a memory of I got to interview Chris when I was a master's student in Saskatchewan. And I think I've told this on the show before, but, I interviewed him backstage for the university newspaper, and they let me come into the sound check, and I watched them play Tertium Non Datur from supporting cast as the sound check. And then we were talking to Sue Lynn about playing that song at sound check, and she's like, yeah, they probably that's a hard song, so they're probably actually practicing it before the show so that they could pull it off live. So that was a really hilarious story as well.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. And bands of that level, like headlining bands, they get like an extended sound check, so they use it to like rehearse dusty songs, and that's also a cool fucking thing to see.
Yeah, and you get to stand there and you're in the room waiting to go on, and you just get to kind of just take it in. You're like, wow, I have a private viewing of one of my favorite bands in the world right now.
Yeah,
it's just amazing. So Ben, whenever I emailed you about this podcast, you responded right away. You were super into it, and I'm just so pumped that you were. And I asked you to pick a song that you might like to talk about on the show. And right away, you picked Duplicate Keys Icaro, the 12th track from Failed States from 2012. Tell me about why you picked this song.
For sure. Well, Failed States, I think at the end of the day is my favorite record. And I think that stems from, like the metalhead inside of me, which is, kind of at my core. And to me, like they if supporting cast was at an 8 on the overdrive, they pushed it to like 10 or 11, just in terms of like, just furiousness and just driving. The whole record is super up tempo and really dark. Like the riffs are darker than ever. And so, like a few things, just like why I immediately thought of Failed States is because like I just relate musically the most to that record, because it's, I don't know, just it's got this metal. I feel like all their Canadian thrash influences like really rose up on this, and like to me, I hear all this like Sacrifice influence and the Razor and Voivod and all those bands. Like a lot of the fast riffs, they're doing these like weird timed like gallopy palm muted riffs, which are they're like Master of Puppets, like battery Metallica type riffs, and so I don't know. And I even love the production, I know they remastered it and it sounds dope, but I liked that it was like a cool change from like a huge sounding record like Supporting Cast to me it just sounded more like an 80s thrash record. It was cool. Like I like the more lo-fi-ness or the the more midi tones on that record. But yeah, man, I don't know. So I immediately thought of that record, and then that song is just the ultimate song to me. It's just, it has everything I want out of like this genre, but certainly like it just takes every element of Propaganda and just, it's like to the max to me.
Awesome. Okay. So you are, you're a musician. You play like everything. Okay. You're the guitar player and you play these like ripping solos and hard sounds. You're the lead vocalist in Hard Sounds, one of the lead vocalists, and you also are a really great drummer in Light This City. And so I want to talk about some of the musicianship within this song from the different instruments and the different perspectives that of your knowledge of being a multi-instrumentalist yourself. So let's start with the guitar. What is cool to you about the guitars in this song, Duplicate Keys?
Oh my goodness. Well, dude, like, okay. The the intro with the clean guitar, it's like, well, first off with like the whispering, like the kind of native lyrical content related whispering, and it sounds like someone's blowing out a fire or a wick or something, but immediately you're like, this is gonna be epic. And then that clean guitar thing is just like, I love when they do like really clean guitar stuff where it's like no gain at all. And in hindsight, they did the same thing on Victory Lap with Adventures in Psychosis, where it's like the Donald Trump sample over that like beautiful clean guitar thing. It just, it's like you get chills right away.
It melted me for sure, straight away.
Yeah, and then, when the fucking thing kicks in, like that first riff when the band kicks in is just like everything I want out of a melodic punk riff. It's like the movement of it is all over the place. The timing, Jord does all these like random like mini blasty kind of like, it starts with like a 2-second blast, like the
Yeah.
And so it's like immediately it's just fucking crazy. And the chords just move all over the place, and the timing's crazy, and like it you feel that Rush influence for sure in that shit, and they worship that band obviously. But yeah, man. And then when the fucking verse kicks in, when it cuts out to his vocal line, and that whole verse riff guitar wise is like just mind-bending to me, because it does the thing I love when bands do this, where it's like it scales down and it settles and then it scales back up. You know what I mean? So it's like on the vocal line it's scaling down, and then it goes that that thing, and it's like that's a weird timed riff that floats over the fast beats, similar to Battery, like Metallica, like those riffs. It's like the drums are going kind of straight ahead for a minute, but the riffs are just on a separate timing. And and just that whole fucking riff is just absolutely insane. That verse, it's crazy. And then the riff after that, I think where he's saying like the path to outer space, that lyric, that riff sounds like a fucking Hypocrisy riff. Like it's super metal. Like
it's like I can't remember how I can't sing it.
Yeah. And that whole thing, like both guitars are playing the same line, they're not harmonizing. So it's like or actually I think on the tail of the riff they're doing an octave harmony, like that band CKY is like famous for.
Yes.
Where like they play all these riffs and the guitars are playing octave harmonies of the same notes. And so that's just like a super sick riff. It always had this like, I think it's because he says outer space, which is brilliant on his part, because it's got like this alien-y vibe. Like it's got Hypocrisy is like this alien themed death metal band. And I love them. But Chris has a way with his songwriting. I'm not sure if he writes the lyrics as he's writing the riffs, which is what it seems like, because those things match up too perfectly. You know what I mean? Where it's like there's a vibe of a riff that matches his lyrics, or certain lines. But and then so after that whole fucking thing, it like builds and builds and builds, and then cuts back to that melodic part, and then it goes straight back into the second verse. It catches you off guard, and it's like they're the best at that kind of shit. Well, they'll throw one measure of a thing back at you just to like remind you, like a cool callback, but then keep you on your toes with the next part. And so like, dude, just the whole structure of the song is fucking out of this world. It's not linear at all, which are my favorite songs. I hate linear songs, even though I tend to write those mostly, which is, I don't like that. So which is why I wrote that 20-minute song.
Yeah.
Is I didn't want repeating parts and shit.
Yep.
But all of Propaganda's songs like just move in this really beautiful way. Like they're so natural and seamless, but they have all kinds of parts and tempos, and they always end up back at the square one. It's they have all these bookends, and this song's like a perfect example of that. But yeah, man, like dude, what's funny about this song too, upon first listen? I always remember my first listens to highly anticipated records, because you can't, like that first impression is so crucial to your, understanding of the record later on, and to the evolution of a band. Whenever you hear the first listen of a new record, you immediately notice the new things and differences. And like that riff in the bridge, where he's exactly that riff, like I was almost like, dude, that's almost like new metal sounding. Like like, and not in a bad way. Like it almost sounded like a Slipknot riff, and I was like, this is crazy. But then once the beat comes in and his vocals and the lyrics in that part are fucking great. It's a
Yes.
great like finisher almost to the album. But yeah, like that riff, I was like, oh, and there's a bunch of like Rat and Cane on that record, and like
Yes.
there's a bunch of songs where they do these single string low, single string down on the fretboard riffs where it's like it's not quite it's thrash metal, but it's like it's almost just got this like different kind of like tech metal vibe, and it's cool. It's super cool. But there's some of that in this song, and the very climax of the song when they finish with that variations of that melodic riff again, that first one. And they just keep changing. It's classic Propaganda. They repeat it, but they keep changing it.
Yeah.
They do triplets. They do 16th notes fills. They stretch it in all these like borderline comical ways, but in this like just amazing. It's perfectly heavy metal. It's like it's grandeur. It's like ending with a bang.
Yeah.
And so it's the parts where when you watch it live and you're wasted, you literally start laughing because it's so good.
Yeah.
You're like, fuck this band. This is too good. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I totally know what you mean.
Yeah, I'll never be close to as good as this. I'll give up now. Fuck it. But
I'm
like
glad. I'm glad I'm not the only one who laughs at shows whenever something so crazy happens that you just can't even believe that you've seen it, and your only actual reaction that you're capable of is laughing at the person who made you feel that way.
Dude, it's one of like that's how you know that the band is real as fuck, or they bring it live. Is like you're so focused and present and like so amazed at their version of like their magic trick. Like anytime someone performs that they're doing a trick on the audience, they're like, look at what we're doing. It's going to affect you in this way. You're going to have some reaction, whether it's like pumping your fist at a riff or laughing at the fucking absurdity of their songwriting prowess. It's like, but those give you the most raw primal reactions. The bands that really know what the fuck they're doing.
Nice. Tell me about Jord. Tell me about how you feel about this as a drummer. And listening to this, because there's so many weird little things that Jord does in this song that really throw you for a loop as a listener, that are really hard to figure out. And anybody who's fairly good at drums won't necessarily be able to just sit down and play this thing.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most like challenging. I mean, I've never tried to play their songs. I'm just like a fan, but as a listener, it's like, in general, a few things just about Jord, like, he's one of the most like expressive punk drummers. He's my favorite punk drummer ever. It used to be Jordan from Strung Out. He's like the OG. He's just the guy that like made me want to play drums.
Yeah.
But Jordan evolved in a more like classic heavy metal way, and Jord from Propaganda, like he's got this Neil Peart thing going on where like he's so expressive with his cymbals, and he uses toms more than any other punk band. Like he does a lot of tom work, and he'll throw them in fills when you're not expecting them. He'll throw them in the middle of beats. Like on this record, he'll do that classic thing where he'll do that single kick floor tom fast beat where it's like a double bass replica sounding beat. And when you see that live is when your jaw drops. You're like, get the fuck out of here, But yeah, man, it's just like on this record, he's like super expressive, and it's more. There's like there's like more playing. It's busier, and on Duplicate Keys, it's out of control. Like again, his cymbal work, like his ride is always so washy and like expressive and vocal. As cheesy as that sounds, like he's got this technique with his wrists that he's really graceful, and you hear it in all these parts. And I mean, the beginning of the song, like, he's just doing ride work and hitting soft crashes. He knows not to hit hard, he like taps the crashes, and then the swell of cymbals, and then it kicks in. Like, it's all this he's the most musical punk drummer, like by far, and yeah, man. So, I mean, this, like every other song on that record, is just like a perfect example of like, he's super engaging. And any drummer that you memorize all their fills, like you sing along their fills or you drum along, that's a rare thing. Because, drummers just always do the same fucking roundhouse fills. They do whatever the easiest, route is. But he takes every opportunity to serve the riff and to kind of like feed this very progressive flow. Like he's a very progressive drummer, like back to the Neil Peart thing. Like he fucks with odd time signatures. He'll do fills that bleed into the next measure, you know, which I always love. Like, so it fakes you out a bit. It's fucking, I don't know, man. I can go on for days, but he's a legend for sure.
Is so, you know, as somebody who has written many songs, who has written many lyrics, also what are your perspectives on this song's lyrical content and the way the song is, you know, sung, and also the words as well?
Yeah, well, like immediately off the bat, like when I before I like really tuned into the lyrics and looked them up and all that when the record came out. And actually, the liner notes of this record had explanations of each song, I believe. Or maybe I'm confusing that with supporting cast, but I know that Todd like talked about every song on the record, something like that. And I remember hearing what it was about. But off the bat, I was like, this is very heavy metal sounding. Like all the words he's using are very verbose and like you know, fucking primordial flow like right away, and like, you know, all this shit, inner path to outer space, you know, calligraphies, geometries, unthinkable, all this shit. It's like, it's very heavy metal. It's very thrash metal, because thrash metal bands will take a concept and just describe the concept in these like adjectives and all this shit. And so it just rings true of heavy metal, which is why I love it. But you know, after like looking into it, you know, it's clearly about like a DMT type trip. And, you know, I've experimented a lot with psychedelics and things like that. And they're always super crazy, you know, rewarding educational experiences. And so this song just lyrically, and I hate writing lyrics. So like, I look up to this guy so much as a lyricist because he's a master. And it's so hard to tell a story within a song, like in such a poetic way. And he, you know, obviously does it on this one, but like, you know, it just seems like one of those things where, you know, the record's failed states. It's about, you know, the state of the country, you know, America, North America, the world, you know, just failed leadership, failed governments, all this shit. And, you know, to end the record with a zoom out perspective where he's just like seeing the absurdity of our perspectives and how we receive information and how biased they are and all those things. And, you know, it's just the way he visually describes like the, you know, the receptors and the blood barrier, like, you know, literally how drugs enter your system and all this shit and how they affect you. It's just, I don't know, man. It's amazing. I fucking, you know, I love it. The rolling hills, water, you know, the whole bridge. Like that's like an ayahuasca trip. That's a DMT trip. It's like, you know, it's like all is, you know, you see the ego collapse. You see how absurd we, you know, absurdly seriously we take certain parts of life and how terrible we treat each other and all this shit culminated in this one song, you know? So I don't know, man. It fucking, you know, I looked it back up before this podcast and it just blew my mind all over again. Yeah.
I don't even have a follow-up on that. You said that so perfectly that I really can't even improve on it. Oh, it's so well said. And, you know, to end such a dark record on the lyric that he does, a haunting certainty that the unifying principle of this universe is love.
Yeah. It's
I just like my hair on my arm just went up when I said it now.
Well, it's similar to the Without Love on supporting cast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's one of those, the ticking clock, you know, all that shit. It's like, you know, it's one of those ones that you just go, fuck, you know, you stand back and, you know, I love lyricism. Like, I think it's lacking in punk in a big way. And, you know, I'm obsessed with hip hop for the same reason, is because lyricism means a lot to me, and mostly because I'm a terrible lyricist. I hate all my lyrics. But so when people can, you know, paint these pictures, it's just like, holy cannoli. And it you know, it makes sense why they wait, or, you know, they do their own thing. They'll wait 4 years in between records. And it's because you get these gems. You don't get some half thought out bullshit, like they really take their time and they make sure. And I love about Failed States, like every song's kind of about a different thing.
Yeah.
Like they're about different topics. It's an overarching theme, but it really like when Things I Like pops out of nowhere, you're like, oh, well, this is just like fun and it's kind of silly and like almost like out of place on the record. but I love it, and it still has thrashy riffs. But yeah, man, I don't know. He's just a great lyricist. He can be silly. He can be fucking. There's a lot of punchlines,
Yeah.
There used to be more, but there's still a lot. But yeah, man, he's a deep thinker. You could tell.
Yeah. Well, Chris is appearing on this episode as well for Duplicate Keys Icaro later on. And, I already spoke to him. And one of the things that he said to me, we talked about the concept of human happiness. And he and I kind of shared a moment where we both kind of said that we have these really good lives and we're very fortunate, but happiness often eludes us. And it was just kind of an amazing moment because he said that he's like, I'm not necessarily a happy person, but I try to retain my sense of humor, and that is essential to essentially survival.
I 100% agree, man. Like I flood whether I'm either listening to hip hop or sometimes punk, a lot of metal, but if not that, like a plethora of comedy podcasts and all these things because I relate to Chris and his nihilist tendencies and his, just, he's lyrically on Adventures in Suikosis. Like, I think he refers to this maybe a little bit, but he has a lot of references to like retreating and wanting to like, escape society because it's a flaming pile of garbage, and I just relate to that a lot. I am living the life I've always wanted to live. I've traveled everywhere with bands. I'm a happy person. I live in a fucking studio apartment and I run a label out of a storage space, but I couldn't ask for anything more. But there's always this core, humming anxiety and dread and like, discomfort and sadness, I guess, because of obvious reasons, just life is tragic. And so I think that's why he relates to the tragedy and comedy, and that you see it in his lyrics almost in every song,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, this has been, I'm so grateful to you for your perspective on the band, how your band has been like inspired by this band as well, and all of your work, and how, they've formed sort of like a trajectory of your life. And you've mentioned several bands that have, sort of helped you on your journey as well. But I mean, this is a special one, this Duplicate Keys Icaro. This is, an otherworldly song. And I was really grateful that you selected it because this is a special one for us here on this show. So, I just wanted to say that I'm glad that you could be here with us to talk about this particular song because so many of your songs have, impacted me in the last 10 years. So to have you on to talk about this song and how we both can bond and connect over this song in particular, it means a lot, man. Seriously.
Dude, my pleasure, man. I love nerding out on this stuff, and I'm happy to do it anytime. And I appreciate everything you said, man. That means a lot to hear anytime that someone even listens to your shit. It's still, I can't listen. I hate my voice. I can't. So anytime people actually tell me, hey, listen, it's like, hey, fuck, man, that's great. That's that makes me happy, and I appreciate you having me on this thing.
Well, and you've got so many projects. Can you tell people who are listening, like where to find you if they want to check out all of the body of work that you've done?
Yeah, honestly, the most immediate thing is, the record label is Creator Destructor Records, and I've released Light the City records on there, Heart Sounds records, the new Chemistry record I was talking about, this band Wilderness Dream that was around for a while that I was doing with Trey from Heart Sounds. All that stuff you can find at the label's Bandcamp, which is just creator-destructor.bandcamp.com. And, all the bands are listed right there, and you could just listen to the records. So I would say just head over there and listen to all that.
Well, Ben, thank you so much for being here. This has been such a pleasure. And I hope everybody out there listening will check out Ben's work in Hard Sounds and Light the City and his work on the record label Creator Destructor. Ben Murray, thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Hey Keith, my name's Cassie, and the reason why I love props so much is that they make me feel alive and they make me think, and it's just smart music, and their songs give me chills and bring tears to my eyes, and their shows are just so amazing, and they're just so intense. They just make me feel everything. Thanks.
So that was a pretty awesome chat with Ben from Hard Sounds and Light the City. Keith, what did you think about my chat with Ben?
I think his discussion of the business side of music is so interesting and alien to me as, you know, a lifelong fan, as someone who never played in a band other than, you know, the singer's sister's 8th grade birthday party. You know, I was not a touring musician. I don't have that connection. So hearing about, you know, a band that's willing to go into debt to play just a handful of shows with some artists that have really inspired them, I think that really makes me want to dive into his music more, since I wasn't really familiar with Heart Sounds or Light the City before you told me about him. So I think that just the band side, the business side is super interesting. And then from the lyrical description, again, it's almost obvious in hindsight, but where he says, you know, All of Failed States is this almost concept album of all of these ways we are collectively living in, you know, a failed state or our own mini failed states. But then the last track just zooming out. And I never put it into those words, but it's just so clear now that after he said that, and to have this depressive, overwhelming, dark, dense album, but then to close with something so, I think, hopeful and uplifting, and seeing us, like, you know, Carl Sagan said, you know, on a speck of dust suspended in a sunbeam. I think just that visualization, like I could almost picture that album in my mind in a way that I didn't before. And that was probably what stood out the most from his really awesome conversation with you.
Yeah. Let's talk about the lyrics a little bit. Do you have any particularly favorite lines from this song that you want to talk about?
So obviously the beginning of the song is super dense in terms of ideas and vocabulary and concepts, and it seems to be a little bit overwhelming. You know, they're visualizations from a cosmic lattice of calligraphies, even like a use of alliteration there. I could see myself almost using this in like a creative writing class.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And just I don't know if I have necessarily a favorite line, but just how visual everything is, which makes sense since the song is, you know, describing you know, a ceremony using ayahuasca from the I shatter and I melt, annihilation, rolling hills, the water flows, the flowers bloom. If I heard that on any other album, I would just probably say like, that's corny. You know, that you know, just describing a river or a landscape. But here, after someone's clearly struggling with what is within all of us, how we access that, and what that means when we do, you know, what remains after us is still this landscape. And I can't help but jump the gun here and get straight to the very end, but just the last line, a profound acceptance of an enormous pageantry, a haunting certainty that the unifying, though I'm pretty sure he sings the operating principle of this universe is love. That was my question that he answered on part 2 of the Duplicate Keys podcast on Patreon. But just that last line, after being jolted back and forth the entire album, and then just being left with this message of love, it is not something you would expect from the band otherwise. But it really, that one just really hits me.
And I've got a few favorite lines as well. My favorite is rolling hills, the water flows, the flowers bloom. There is no me, there is no you, there is all.
Yeah.
There is no you, there is no me, and that is all. So like this is heavy stuff here.
Yeah.
And, as I'm super into like the religions of the world, philosophies. I talk about that stuff on my other podcast, Classical Ideas, all the time. I'm a religious studies high school teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And this line hits me in a way that makes me think about a lot about the Tao Te Ching. But these lines are also essential and remind me of like the Buddhist notion of no self. Which is one of my favorite concepts to teach about in the religious studies courses I've taught over the years. So basically, like, picture yourself, okay? Pinpoint the self. Where is it? Where is you? Is it your body? Well, your body is like parts, right? So if your arm is lost in a tragic accident, you wouldn't necessarily be less, the big picture you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You would be less you per se, because your personality could remain intact, though it could take a lot of time to physically and psychologically recover from something that traumatic. But so you can lose parts of your physical body and still have, quote unquote, the self remain intact, sort of. However, point to the self. It can't be done. It's not like the space behind your eyes necessarily. The self is sort of like this illusory concept, and the self exists entirely within the ego. And Ben was sort of getting into this as well. And when we think of ego, it's easy to identify terrible things done in the name of ego. Rage, jealousy, hatred, evil, ego, 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 ego. Okay. So the elimination of ego in the sense of self is an interesting prospect. So when eliminating the essentialness of the individual self or ego, we can come to see what Chris means by no me, no you, there is all, leading to the understanding of a haunting certainty that the unifying principle of this universe is love. I mean, so this is like, this is cosmic stuff,
right?
This is stuff that the sages and philosophers of the centuries and millennia have been talking about since human beings were, thinking about these types of ideas.
Yeah. Before listening to the Patreon podcast, I think I interpreted this song, like the lyrics, as our bodies containing a sort of geologic time scale wealth of information, but we tend to prevent ourselves from tapping into that knowledge and data because of the prejudices and biases that we have built as a society, as a culture, in families. And we've lost interest in asking those bigger unanswerable questions about the universe, about beauty, about life and love. And for me, like personally, as an atheist who has in a way struggled with atheism, partly because what it seems to represent and what those who are associated with atheism tend to promote and encourage, which I don't certainly don't subscribe to, whether that's fear or ridicule of religion. It's taken me a while to come around to this idea of a sort of secular, non-religious spiritualism. And this song definitely makes me want to learn more and explore more, because how could I, as a person who, as an atheist, why would this be my favorite song, right? Why does it move me so much if the spiritual qualities in it didn't resonate or connect with me in some way?
Yeah. Well, and thinking about atheism, to me, one of the drawbacks of, saying I am an atheist is essentially declaring your certainty around so many things.
Yeah.
And human beings are so frail. And to me, just saying I am absolutely certain about one thing is just boring. It's just like the most, it's the most certain, boring, expressive declaration of one's own importance. So, I see what you mean. But
The conversation seems to stop.
Exactly.
Where
You know
do
what
you
I
go
mean?
further thinking about things or challenging yourself
Yeah.
if that's the end game?
Yeah. And, thinking about this topic on this song, we're talking about psychedelic substances, and these things are illegal in our world. And if you look at the imagery that such an experience, which is quote unquote illegal in the laws of our land here, what these experiences allow a person to tap into within the human mind, and the questions and mysteries that could be addressed and possibly solved by tapping into these experiences, which are illegal, it's almost nerve-wracking to even talk about, because it's like we're sitting here and talking about these topics, but we're talking about something which is illegal, but which helps people tap into pieces of their brain that we can't get to otherwise.
Are there testing done with hallucinogens for like opioid addiction and
Yeah,
smoking? Like I remember hearing on NPR a guy saying that.
Michael Pollan.
So the person I heard was someone struggling with addiction, and said that whatever substance he took, that he saw all of space time laid out before him. He saw the beginning and the end, and he himself was reduced to a speck on a speck on a speck, and instantly he didn't want to smoke anymore. So there's value here in some way, and I don't know how to do a cost risk analysis of the drawback of making this available, but reading the lyrics here, and obviously it had a profound impact on someone who was already maybe questioning some things that they how they framed or viewed the world.
Yeah, and so another favorite line of mine is an inner path to outer space, or a
Yeah.
facile article of faith, falsifiable fantasies, or freestanding parallel realities. And you were kind of getting into this a second ago, but psychedelic research is like skyrocketing in like med schools around the world. I know that you can go back and read the work of like Terrence McKenna, but there's also if anybody out there has heard the podcast by Tim Ferriss, the Tim Ferriss Show, he's like really well known for a book called like the 4-Hour Work Week, and then he talks to experts in fields about their lives on his Tim Ferriss Show podcast. But Tim Ferriss is like a huge believer in researching the power of psychedelic substances. And Michael Pollan, the person who was very well known for The Omnivore's Dilemma, that book, Michael Pollan has a new-ish book out now about psychedelics as well. And so this is like becoming less of a fringe thing for sure. However, still illegal. And so, another thing that I was checking out recently whenever I was thinking about this song is there's a show on Hulu that I've been watching called Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia, which is all about psychedelics. I watched an episode last night of that show where the host goes to Mexico and does a magic mushroom ceremony with a shaman, and it was really interesting. And so, like, the opening of different realms within the mind lead to the idea that these parallel realities exist next to us at all times. I mean, that's a pretty awesome lyric and imagery by Chris, is like the fact that we see this world as one thing, and it's almost like that Upside Down within that show, The Stranger Things on Netflix. It's like what exists right next to us that we can't see, but if we shifted our perspective a fraction, what would we then be able to see? It's just so cool.
Yeah, it's metal, sci-fi, it's spiritual, psychedelic. It's all of that kind of wrapped into one for sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about the music a little bit. I know that Ben and I talked a ton about music, but what are your thoughts on the musicianship within this particular song, Duplicate Keys Icaro?
Yeah, so we mentioned that their final tracks over the last few albums have this tendency to be just these massive closers that are frantic. They sound like they're almost going to come off the rails. They're like this last ditch effort as a plea to convince the listener, if they haven't already been convinced, to take these issues and these ideas seriously. And for me, Duplicate Keys is so well written and performed. It maintains that epic feel without ever feeling like they're losing control, either the song being too fast or maybe some missteps in writing. Just like the thrashy guitar riffs, coupled with like just the back and forth, almost like a call and response between Chris and the Beeve. There's that riff under an inner path to outer space. I mean, if that riff alone went on for another 8 minutes, I would be absolutely fine with that.
Yeah.
It's so heavy and it's so catchy. The bass here is like heavier and kind of grindy. The drums have like groove that match the opening riffs. There are these intricate fills. There's like switching to like, a thrashy backbone and like, a proggy backbone. So the drums kind of go in and out. And I think there are just these different parts, the quiet intro, these pauses for the audience, the sound effects. There's like the building proggy riff under, there is no me. The closing solo. I think the way that everything fits together, and especially that, Chris mentioned on Patreon that there are some things that he doesn't love about his decisions with Iteration and Zoochosis. And for me specifically with Zoochosis, while I love that song, and we'll talk about later, there's just a few things that always kind of bugged me musically about it, even before hearing that conversation. But I can't imagine anything about this song being improved upon. I mean, we're talking about probably my not only my favorite Propaganda song, but probably my favorite song. Yeah.
Oh my God, favorite song.
Yeah, I mean, this is, and which is interesting because it didn't start as, when I first heard this album, I definitely had a different song that was like, oh yeah, this is my favorite. And then I just kept listening. And then I was like, wait a second. How was I not absolutely blown away by this the first time I heard it? I think it was just so, lyrically and musically melting my peanut of a brain that I almost couldn't process it.
It was beyond me. I didn't love it. I didn't love it the first time I heard it either, because it was so far beyond what I was willing to invest in it to think about that I didn't get it. You know what I mean? So, musically, there's a few little nuggets in this song as well that haven't been brought up yet. And so I don't know what it is, and I think Chris may have talked about this in his episode, but there's like a laser sound effect.
Yeah.
That comes in, and it's after the line, "Infinite jolly screens, alive fluorescent." And then it's like whoa, 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 whoa.
Right.
And so for those of you who don't know, a jolly is the term for like a perforated lattice screen. And these are like ornament patterns that are used through like calligraphy, and they're geometric. And this form of like architectural jolly decoration is like super common in like Islamic architecture. So if you live in like a major city somewhere around the world, or if you travel, whenever you see like a masjid, an Islamic masjid, which is also in the West called a mosque, but the term is masjid, look at the way that the building has designs on the side of it that look like almost like a screen door with all the little holes in it and all the the geometrically spaced apart pieces of it. So but it's also like carved in stone, and they're massive on the sides of buildings or inside of buildings. So for those of you who don't know what a jolly screen is, I thought that was a really incredible line, because Chris is talking about these unthinkable geometries within the song, and then he drops this Islamic architecture detail out of nowhere. Blew me away. I mean, that takes just such a profound awareness of the world to be able to put a line like that in the song. So then there's the riff leading into the rolling hills part. Da, 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 da. And it's just so huge, man. It's so huge when you listen to that riff in like headphones, or when you see them perform this song live. Like I saw them play Duplicate Keys Icaro in 2012.
Yeah.
And unreal, man. It tonally fits the immensity of the song. And it like that riff, da, 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 it just asks you to go on this cosmic journey. You know?
Yeah, I agree. I got to see them. They played it in 2017 at the Metro in Chicago. And as soon as that audio sample of kind of the whispering singing started, I was like, oh boy, I'm gonna end up pulling something in the pit. and looking up a Jolly Screen now, just to kind of have it, fresh as you're talking about it, I get like a hidden image kind of feel to where the longer you look, either the more symbols or a bigger picture starts to develop. So like these complex interlocking visuals, which totally make sense within the context of, a psychedelic experience.
Yeah. And they can expand infinitely outwards.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like, they might not even repeat the same geometric pattern. A lot of times, like, the pattern changes every single layer that you go outward, and it can go on infinitely if you have enough space. You know what I mean?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So the opening piece of this song is super special as well, and I just wanted to point it out. So the opening is of the whispering, the shh, is it's called an Icaro. It's the beginning of an Icaro. And this particular Icaro, which is an Icaro is an ayahuasca ceremonial shaman singing to plants, singing to the plant. And this particular part that is recorded and used as a sample in the beginning of this song is available in full. And if I remember to put it in the show notes, there might be a SoundCloud link in the show notes for this episode where you can listen to the full Icaro that the band used on this record. It was recorded in 2007 in Winnipeg, I think. And they use this as part of the song. But yeah, so whenever Chris is doing an ayahuasca trip, it like largely begins with an Icaro, and he and I are going to talk about that later. But I hope to remember that to put that whispering, which turns into a song as well, into the show notes. So that's another thing that I love is the use of an actual Icaro in this particular song.
I think I'm having kind of a revelation here. Obviously, Chris mentions Carl Sagan's Contact like all the time. He used to post about it on Twitter frequently. He's mentioned it on his podcast. But that novel and movie showing that religion and science, religion, if I mean spirituality and science, don't have to necessarily be antagonistic. And it's actually like a very hopeful and encouraging and uplifting sci-fi movie, that's not about an invasion, and it's not an action movie. But even that intermingling of terms in the title, you have this idea related to science, whatever's happening in the brain during a psychedelic experience, but also the spiritual side, from these songs that are being sung. I see these two parts like actually converging rather than them being opposite. But I kind of had that idea while you were chatting, so I wanted to share that.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, to me, the biggest lesson of this song is that what we immediately perceive is not all that there is.
Mm.
The immensity of this place is impossible to grasp. And that's just like my big takeaway from this. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think I could word it any differently. Just zoom out as much as we can. Zoom
Yeah.
out on the world around us, zoom out on ourselves.
And I know that we're not alone in this as well, with this particular song, because I was looking at YouTube earlier just to get some comments, some reactions for people who love this band. And here's a few good ones. So one YouTube user wrote, "If I could morph from a human into a song, it would be this one."
That's great.
Oh my God, it was so perfect. And then here's another one. This is another YouTube user. "My God, best lyrics ever written with a song to match. Life as good as it can ever be reproduced in a song right here."
That sounds like me. Yeah.
Amazing. So well said. So I have another one that's like a 3-part comment where I liked an interaction between a few different people. So the
Sure.
first person writes, "Honestly, one of the best songs I've ever heard." And then a person responded, "The best song, the only song, we accept no others." And then the first person responded, "I wholeheartedly concur. Still gives me chills. Such a message. And what a jam."
Yeah, nice.
So Keith, rate the song.
It's a 500 out of 5.
It is. It's like there's it. I'm going to stick to the rules here. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5. But Keith, I have a serious question for you. Is this the best propaganda song ever in your view?
It's my favorite. Yeah, in my opinion, it is the best song musically, lyrically, compositionally, by far. I don't know if this one could ever be topped.
These are likely. I'm not going to commit. I'm going to waffle. I'm going to be a fence sitter here. I'm not going to commit that this is the best propaganda song ever, but I am going to say that these are probably my favorite, within the top 3 favorite propaganda lyrics for sure. Oh, all right. So Keith, what do you think we should do now?
I guess we're going to have to hear what Chris Hanna had to say with your conversation.
Man, I'm really stoked about this. So our last thing we have for this episode is an interview that I did with Chris Hanna. I talked to Chris for a long time, so I apologize. Sorry, not sorry, etc. For the length of this episode. But I think this is a fantastic episode because we had Ben talk about the music. We get to talk a little bit about what this song means to us. And now we get to close it out with something that is just such an honor for me. I talked to Chris for a long time about what Icaros are, how he came to be aware of them, what Icaros sound like, how Icaros are written and developed, what Icaros mean. We got heavy too. I talked to him about his changing views related to spirituality across the course of his life. We talked about the concept of human happiness, and we also talked about his various experiences of attending ayahuasca ceremonies. And I just have to say that it was a true privilege picking Chris's brain about this. In addition to this interview that you're about to hear from Chris, I cannot recommend his 2 podcast episodes enough. I know I sound like a broken record, but those are on his patreon.com/JesusHChris. and his Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality podcast. The interview that you're going to hear with Chris here is a direct response to his original podcast episode. So I've asked all of these questions as a follow-up to Chris's original Duplicate Keys Icaro Part 1 episode. So if you haven't heard that, this interview stands alone. Like, you can totally listen to this if you've never heard that, and it will make sense. But like this conversation with Chris is my direct response to his immaculate piece of work that he already created and put out on his Patreon. So let's get to our interview with Chris Hanna from Propagandy.
This is Adam from Columbus, Ohio, 20 years plus listener. Never forget getting into this band. First band made me think, opened my mind, changed my worldview, challenged me to be more involved in my community to educate myself in World Matters, and also just absolutely enjoy the shred. Amazing band, met them many times, amazing people, huge fans, best band on the planet.
Chris Hanna, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
It is a delight to have you here, sir. Can you just spend a moment and introduce yourself to the audience however you see fit? Because you're speaking to multiple audiences that may not know who you are.
Oh, I'm Chris. I'm a middle-aged dad from Canada, and for half of my life I've played in a so-called punk band called Propagandy.
Wonderful. So I'm a big fan of your band, and I've talked about your band on Classical Ideas podcast before. So this is a real treat for me and a pleasure. And we're here today to discuss the topic of ayahuasca. It's something I've never talked about on this show, but which I'm very excited to learn about through your direct experiences and what you've gleaned about, the topic over the years of studying it and practicing it. So the questions I have are largely in response to a piece of writing in a podcast episode that you did on your show called Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality that I would encourage everybody to find. It's on your Patreon, and you can tell everybody about that in a bit. But it's also the topic of a song you wrote called Duplicate Keys Icaro for your band Propagandy. I was taken by some of your acknowledgments within your episode about duplicate keys, where you talk about some of your spiritual trajectory variations over the course of your life. Can you sort of summarize your spiritual trajectory that you've gone on throughout your life?
Perhaps somewhat. Slow and somehow consistent, even though I wasn't always aware of that.
Yeah.
At certain points in my life, but also not particularly deep or researched or anything. I certainly haven't. Speaking of ayahuasca specifically, I certainly have no expertise about ayahuasca, or like in terms of history, or in terms of what's happening, or in terms of the ceremony. It was something in the course of my curiosity about the mystery of the universe that I encountered a number of times, and had a couple of profound positive and profound negative experiences. Or seemingly negative experiences. So, but I would say that how I got there was through a general sense of spirituality, in quotation marks, that I've had my entire life. That was never nurtured, and I also didn't find the expressions of spirituality around me, like the officially sanctioned expressions of it, particularly meaningful as a young person. So it really hasn't been tended to very, very much over my life.
Well, and I know that I was reading your essay and your piece last night, and I know that you mentioned that in the early 2000s, you sort of latched on to like the leaders of what was known at the time as like the new atheism movement, but then you sort of came to critique that as almost too narrow. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, like I still identify as an atheist, like
Mm-hmm.
somebody I guess I'm spiritual, but I don't have any detailed descriptive beliefs in a God per se, and there's a lot of things about atheism, almost even some parts of new atheism that resonate with me, in terms of it being a response to oppressive structures in our society, in our civilization. But on the other hand, at least the voices that I was kind of originally tuned into in new atheism began to express viewpoints about the world order that were counter to what I thought would be consistent with an atheism that is trying to depose oppressive structures in the first place. There was a lot of apologism for, say, U.S. imperialism, for example, and I was just like, whoa, wait a minute, how come the new atheists I'm so attracted to seem to be morally questionable on these seemingly obvious points, whereas I always mention Chris Hedges, a former Presbyterian minister who identifies as a Christian and whose values resonated with me far more than any of the new atheists when it came to anything beyond a superficial argument about the supernatural, So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it seems like to me you sort of like embrace the mystery of the universe, moving sort of away from the new atheists who always sort of couch those defenses in sort of a rational. They always explain it as being a rational mindset, but then you mentioned some of the critiques that you had with them. So does that also make sense? You sort of like move away from the certainty and towards the more mysterious as well, and embrace those uncertainties.
Yeah, for me at least, the certainty, it throws up a few red flags for me these days. I just certainty doesn't really resonate with me the way it did for a time, and I think new atheism was becoming sort of the parallel of the certainty of absurd expressions of religion. Yeah, I guess exactly what you're saying. Like I don't really find certainty particularly attractive, and that's not to say that I don't have values that I'm fairly certain about in this world.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as bigger questions about the mystery of the universe or the non-mystery of the universe, I think I don't really have time for too much certainty either way.
Yeah. Well, and something in your piece that I was really compelled by was the notion that you constantly refer to as like feeling like broken in the world, and how you're sort of on this journey right now in order to somewhat like repair brokenness. And I think this is something that I've been feeling a lot about lately, and I kind of want to talk a little bit about the concept of like human happiness before we dive into some specific ayahuasca experiences that you've had. So, I read, I exercise, I have a nice home. I feel like my brain functions reasonably well as a person. I have a beautiful family and I travel, but like, I feel like sort of like a kindredness to you, to where I don't necessarily call myself like a quote unquote happy person. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of listened to a lot of your music and a lot of your podcasts, and you probably hear this type of thing a lot as like a public facing figure who people give attention to through your music. But You seem like a curious, creative person. I feel like you and I sort of have that in common a lot. And you're also, reasonably intelligent, and you think about things and care about the world in general, especially as a parent now as well. But you sort of like in your writings and in your work, it seems like you sort of struggle like me into grasping onto and holding like happiness as a sustained human emotion. And I'm wondering if I'm sort of on track here about how if the search for happiness and contentment and personal well-being is sort of like what instigated a journey of like pursuing psychedelics and things like that for you.
Not consciously. I think it would be correct to say that I've not been a particularly happy person over the course of my life. Like I have a very good sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
and I deploy it often, and I have a good time. Like if you asked the average people I interact with, I don't know if they'd say I'm not outwardly happy, but they would assume that there was. I think they would assume I have some level of happiness, and I probably do, but I do. I think it's more having a sense of humor, and getting through the day, more than it is happiness that I'm tuned into.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I'm not sure if I was ever. I never thought. I don't think I ever thought any of this experimentation with psychedelics were going to create happiness for me. But I was definitely curious, and the idea of brokenness was actually a real recent either revelation or an illusion. I'm not sure which yet. I haven't figured it out. Like in the past year. So, yeah, I wasn't. I haven't decided yet if I am as broken as that experience suggested. But yes, I have always been not entirely happy.
Do you think that this feeling that you've had, like, the last couple of years, I think dating back to like 2011, was that something where you're like, kind of like, well, what the heck? Maybe I'll try and see this thing that may show me the mysteries of the universe in new ways, and then maybe that will help me reframe my view of the world. Does that play any role in it?
It's almost hard to go back and remember what I was really thinking beyond looking for novelty at the time and stumbling into something that was bigger than novelty.
So it had unexpected results, is what you're saying.
I think so, kind of. Like in that same episode, I had described an experience in my 20s where I had experimented with psilocybin mushrooms, and I had a profound experience in that situation that made me wonder about things. But there is this sort of there's this cold hard light of day thing that happens even after these profound experiences, where you do where what is profound about the experience dissipates over time, especially if you don't integrate the experience into your material reality. And I think that's happened to me every time. I everything, the sense of wonder, the sense of mystery dissipates or dulls, I think, if you don't do something with it. And I think I'm getting away from your original question. I'm just trying to imagine what I was looking for, because I don't know if I don't think I had any plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's fine. So what piqued your interest in actually trying ceremonial ayahuasca?
The opportunity, the opportunity came up, but I had previously to discovering this opportunity to attend a ceremony here in my hometown, I had encountered, for some reason, I had picked up this book called The Cosmic Serpent by Jeremy Narby. We had an anarchist bookstore here in Winnipeg through the 90s and early 2000s. And towards the end of the existence of this anarchist bookstore, I was just where I customarily bought books about how the world works and how the world does not work. I happened upon this Jeremy Narby book called The Cosmic Serpent, and I thought, well, this is an odd book to be here at Mondragon Anarchist Bookstore. And I don't know why. I guess I read the back of it, and it had, I think, Michael Harner, PhD, and some blurb on the back that gave it some legitimacy. So I took it home, probably because they were blowing out all their stock of books, and I read it, and it was one part laughable and one part compelling, and some of the things in it resonated with. It reminded me of my experience in the 90s with psilocybin to some degree, and because it was specifically about ceremonial use of ayahuasca in Peru. And through my beer league hockey team, unbelievably, I came upon this opportunity to attend a ceremony here in Winnipeg that was inspired by some individuals' trip to Peru, where they studied under an ayahuasquero in Peru. So yeah, I was just like, well, this opportunity is presenting itself. This is, there was a weird sense of sync about the whole thing. And so I just thought, why the hell not? Give it a go.
Nice. I just had a flashback to living in Saskatoon and going to Turning the Tide bookstore over there in the next province over from you, thinking about that place. And so, reading these books, does the history of ayahuasca ceremonies in South America interest you at all? Like, what are did you learn any historical tidbits of information about these ceremonies that still stick with you?
Most of what I've read or seen about ceremonies that occur in Peru or in South America are contemporary. And I think what's actually stood out to me the most, like I don't really know much about the history of it, but the one allegedly historical tidbit is that it's surmised that ayahuasca has only been in use for approximately 700 years, I think. I don't know how the hell they figured that out. But I remember hearing that figure and thinking, I doubt that. For some reason, I just felt like, one, how would you know that for sure? And two, it just doesn't seem, something about the ayahuasca ceremony seems older to me than 700 years ago, which is actually fairly recent. So,
yeah. Well, in ayahuasca ceremonies that you describe in your Duplicate Keys Icaro essay and podcast episode, it's much different than like just, getting a baggie of hallucinogenic mushrooms from some guy and chomping down on them or whatever. And there's a lot that goes into this. And I'm curious if you can, go into some dorky minutia with me about how ayahuasca ceremonies go, who leads it, the steps in the process, things like that.
Sure. I mean, fairly superficial recounting because, I've only...
Oh, yeah, just as a participant.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. Well, you're... In my experience here in Winnipeg, a week prior to the ceremony, you are advised to avoid... there's certain foods. I think it's easy for me because I'm vegan, but apparently you're not supposed to eat animal products, anything with oil or sugar. You're supposed to avoid that, avoid alcohol and caffeine for a week before. I think in South America, they advise that for a few weeks or a month. And then leading up to the ceremony, you do this, you avoid consumption of these things, which apparently interfere with the experience. And at the ceremony itself, you're gathered in a circle usually, and there's an ayahuasquero who leads the ceremony, and usually has an attendant or two helping them out. And they prepare the ayahuasca. But I've usually seen it in repurposed pop bottles. I was really surprised when I first saw that. I thought, wow, that seems very unceremonious.
Yeah.
To have it in a reused A&W root beer bottle, or whatever it is. And then they pour it into, in our case, they pour it into a little ceramic chalice. And after a while of silence, people I think just are generally, I think, sitting around preparing themselves mentally or developing intentions for the ceremony. I'm not sure what exactly each person is doing. I'm usually just frantically wondering why I'm doing this. And then the ayahuasquero comes around and pours out a measure of ayahuasca, a small measure of it, into this tiny chalice, and one by one people consume it. They accept it and consume it, and then the lights go out and people wait. And sometimes 20 minutes, 40 minutes later, the ayahuasquero begins singing Icaros, which are songs meant to guide the experience. I think if you ask an ayahuasquero, they are singing literally to the medicine, communicating with the medicine itself, and trying to invoke good spirits. I don't know what to think of all that. I do know that the Icaros do serve a purpose of it. In my mind, it feels like an anchor to sanity when things are getting crazy. And I think it's part of the whole ceremony itself is what, if you talk to modern researchers who are researching the use of psychedelics now, everybody talks about set and setting to create a setting where people feel at ease and thereby don't necessarily go down the road of carrying this material baggage, fear and anxiety into the experience itself. So the ceremony, on a practical level, like no matter what you think is actually happening, in a spiritual sense or a supernatural sense, it provides a setting that it feels very important at moments during the experience to keep you anchored to a sense of safety and solidarity with other human beings that are also going through this experience. But yes, I mean, some people who attend the ceremonies, including obviously ayahuasquero, they mean it literally. It's not just set and setting. They believe they are communing with entities from the plants. So yeah.
Do you know anything about how it's made? You mentioned that it was served to you in repurposed pop bottles. Is it made off-site and then brought to the site where the ceremonies happen, or is it made like right in front of you? Do you know anything about that process?
It's a long process. I think it takes a few days, at the very least. And it's here in Winnipeg, the ayahuasquero who runs the ceremonies that I've attended, he brings it up from Peru, and in those repurposed pop bottles, and just crosses the border with it.
Wow.
And says, I say, aren't you afraid of getting caught? And he says, if the plants want me to get caught, then I will be caught. It would be part of the process. But so far the plants have not permitted that. So, and I'm like, okay.
Incredible.
Yeah, but it's quite it seems to be quite a process to actually create ayahuasca. It's not something I think someone's going to do here in their backyard in Winnipeg. but I don't know. I don't know too much about it. I know it's combining at least two separate kinds of plants and boiling them over the course of hours or days, and then decanting this syrup from what's left at the end. And it's incredible that someone ever thought to do it and then to drink it once you see and taste what it tastes like, because yeah, it's something else.
How would you describe the taste?
Very earthy. It's like drinking liquid compost, in a way. It's not as unpleasant or bitter as people have said. It's very strong, and sometimes when I sense the taste, like I get a flashback of the taste, I'm like, ugh. But then sometimes I'm like, it's not that bad. It definitely has its own thing going on, but typically people describe it as bitter and unpleasant to actually put in your mouth.
Gotcha. Well, and so you're in this ceremony, right? And you're in a circle and you're with other people and it's dark, and people react to psychoactive substances in very different ways. Are there any risks involved in doing ayahuasca, in your experience?
I've never heard of anyone dying.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if anybody has any pre-existing psychological tendencies towards medically classified dysfunction, that I'm told it can exacerbate that. Not ayahuasca specifically, but any sort of altered state of consciousness could trigger, if schizophrenia is in your family, it's possible that it could trigger it. But I've never heard of that happening from anybody I've ever known. It's one of those things you see on the side of a Tylenol bottle. Perhaps this is possible, but I've never seen it, never heard of it actually happening. Certainly never experienced it, despite having what people would call bad or dark trips. I've never myself experienced that. No.
Okay. So you named a song from your Failed States LP, which came out in like 2012, after one of these experiences, Duplicate Keys Icaro. And you mentioned a little bit about what the purpose of Icaros are, and I know that you know somebody who sings Icaros, right? Have you talked to them about like what those experiences? Have you like talked to them about what Icaros mean to them as far as like their life goes by singing these types of songs?
Well, to them, again, they're literally communing with plant entities, or entities that the plants conscious plants put them in contact with. Beyond that, I haven't pushed too much about what they mean to those people. But at the ceremonies I've attended, it's been a shared task. The Icaros, usually the ayahuasquero, sings for a bit and then passes it on to somebody else in the circle. And I guess people come up with their own Icaros. Some of them like make sense universally. Like you kind of understand why somebody's singing it. You get the gist of it. And then some of them, there was one time somebody was singing about Winnie the Pooh and the 100-Acre Forest, and it made no sense. Made no sense at first. It seemed really silly, and then at some point in the ceremony, it was like, wait a minute, that makes perfect sense.
Oh my gosh!
So I don't know what the rules are or the directives are around the content of an Icaro, but it seems to be whatever matters to somebody on a personal level could be the content of an Icaro.
Interesting. That's really cool because, like, I was wondering if there has to be like a specific song and melody sung that like dates back hundreds of years, but it sounds like these can also be modern original compositions depending on the ayahuasquero.
The lyrical or language content, or could be, yeah, but they all do seem to follow sort of a similar structure or melody. Like you kind of have to. You've heard one, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of this bouncing, self-echoing. There is like a psychedelic vibe to them. Like they sound. Say if you're sober, you're not under the influence of ayahuasca, and you hear an Icaro, you can hear, but you've had a psychedelic experience before. You can hear what they're trying to approximate with the sound. Like there's this echoey bounce that is, for me, reminds me of sounds under the influence of mind altering substances. So I think that's a common feature of Icaros.
That's so cool. Well, okay, so I was listening to your episode yesterday, and then I listened to Duplicate Keys Icaro last night before I went to bed, just to kind of put myself in the mindset for this conversation. And a line that really jumped out at me is, these duplicate keys throw the floodgates open on a raw data sphere of pure information. How does ayahuasca unleash the brain's data sphere?
Like in a biological sense?
Yeah, sure.
Well, the raw data sphere was a term that stood out. One of the McKenna brothers said it. Terrence and his brother Dennis obviously were sort of at the front of the psychedelic movement back in the day, and I think it was Dennis McKenna, in describing the experience, he used the term raw data sphere, and I was like, whoa, that captures exactly, some of the moments I've experienced. Like, it's just this overwhelming flood of cosmic data that you suddenly have access to, and because you don't understand it, it's overwhelming. But I think, and this is again going back to like contemporary research about what psychedelics do in the brain. There's the reducing valve. What's the gland? I can't remember now. There's something in our brain, obviously, that constricts the amount of information. Typically, constricts what we perceive in our everyday material reality, so we can function and survive and feed ourselves and not walk into traffic. But when that psychedelics relax the reducing valve and permit sometimes an unimaginable amount of information about the world around us, that's the raw data sphere, like the reality. Like, sort of, I think the Matrix movies would be a good visual metaphor for the idea of what's actually happening. Where Neo can not only see the material reality, he sees everything that underpins it, the programming, and for brains that are not accustomed to that, it can be frightening, definitely overwhelming, incomprehensible, and which is why it's hard to describe the experience, because we were not used to having that much information at once and being able to kind of sift through it and then bring it back and describe it to people. It's not really feasible.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the next line of the song actually captures that really well, because you write that it's visions so astonishing, preposterous, impossible, a cosmic lattice of calligraphies, geometries unthinkable. And like, it feels like you're inside an Alex Grey painting. And if anybody doesn't know who Alex Grey is, he did the artwork for the band Tool's 10,000 Days LP. But, it reminds me of also like lines from like the Bhagavad Gita. I'm going to get dorky on you with religious studies for a second. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna saw he saw like the universal form of God with like unlimited mouths, unlimited eyes, unlimited wonderful visions. And it was decorated with like celestial ornaments and like divine weapons and garlands, and basically like God covered the entire sky. And it's like wondrous and brilliant, unlimited, all expanding. So to me, like, that's sort of what you're describing in this song. It's like this undescribable thing. Can you even put into words like what is happening to a human being when you're at like the height of like an ayahuasca vision? Like, do any like memories jump out at you of what you've seen?
Yeah, but like exactly as you say, it is it's a fool's errand to even try to describe them, because then you become the psychedelic caricature in every movie. You know, trying to, like, you do come across like a fool if you try to, like, it just sounds ridiculous.
You just
if
sound crazy.
You sound like it. Yeah, you sound like, you know, a pothead, like typically as they would have been depicted in a early 80s teen com. There is no way to really. I think someone like Alex Gray does a really good job of like distilling some of the visual component of it, but his paintings, they don't do it. Like, they don't do the sense of being overwhelmed, because in the real experience, you are in that painting. You are part of the light. You know, you are, and it's all moving, and it's changing from nanosecond to nanosecond, and there's more and more. It's just impossible to, like, I feel like an idiot right now even trying to describe it. But it is like, every time, everybody, when they have an experience like this, they do try to come back and they do start trying to describe it. And people who haven't had the experience are just like, oh man, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's bonkers.
Yeah. So, you know, if you say that somebody looked at an Alex Gray painting, but you also mentioned that you're sitting in the dark normally, or do the lights come back on when it takes hold after the Icaro is sung? Like, can you see anything, or is it all just purely mental?
Well, I mean, depends on how blacked out the room is. Obviously, your eyes adjust to it, but your eyes also, that your eyes use the darkness and the lack of contrast to enhance the experience. I don't know. It definitely. I think that the majority of the experience is intended to be with your eyes closed, and so the darkness helps that, and because you are trying to be inside yourself. You go somewhere inside yourself. But there has been points in the ceremonies where I have opened my eyes, usually out of frantic fear, and I have been able to see around the room despite the darkness, which is frightening in itself, because you start to see things that probably aren't even there. But I think the purpose of the darkness is to help you melt into the experience rather than be distracted. You know?
So you're largely motionless in place, and you're not like roaming around, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully, because if you are roaming around, you're barfing somewhere, right?
Yeah, you might be, or you might be frantic. So,
Gotcha.
Not to scare people. I'm just. I've rarely seen that too. Like, I've been the most frantic person, I think, and I just lie there most of the time.
Yeah. Should people have experiences like this as like human beings who have like a life to live? Is this something that you should you've encouraged people to experience as sort of like what it means to be alive, pushing the bounds of consciousness sort of experience?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to come through so-called psychedelics either. People can achieve this through physical activity, or just like extreme physical activity, or meditation. Some people have an innate ability to enter these sort of states, but I think about people who are particularly people who are in positions of power in our society currently, who obviously have not had an experience such as this to sort of open their minds to the mystery of the universe and peel them away from their obsession with the material world and the drive to accumulate material goods in that material world. I definitely think you come away from the experience with a different way of looking at things, and that can only help us at this point, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that I kind of got the impression that these experiences sort of reframed your own view of the universe in general. I mean, you conclude the song by saying, "This universe is love." Is that like a big takeaway that you had from having these experiences several times over the course of quite a few years?
I think so. Yeah, there is a lot of people have described having this experience too, where you are deconstructed in the experience, ego dissolution, and you find yourself melting into this, like, again, trying to describe this is absurd, but melting into like a cosmic sea of pure love. Not romantic love, but it's impossible to describe, but it's a very compelling experience. And when you come back from that experience, when you come back to baseline, it will stick with you. It doesn't, like, even as the months march on, that will forever, even in your worst moments, you will have that sense somewhere that the purpose here is rooted in love.
Mm. And when you do come back to like sort of baseline, as you've mentioned, your perception of things changes. So, for example, like an example for me would be like the art of Vincent van Gogh, or there's a record I really love by the band Strung Out, Twisted by Design. What pieces of art have changed the most for you in response to these experiences? Because I know that you're very curious as far as like art, literature, music, and things like that in the world. How have any of those pieces of art changed for you after coming back from these experiences?
I think mostly just realizing that a lot of what I've enjoyed over the course of my life, what I've been drawn to in terms of art, literature, and film, a lot of it now appears to be a metaphor for the so-called psychedelic experience, or for some sort of revelation about the true nature of the universe, that I didn't see in those pieces of art previously. I just knew I was drawn to them for some reason, but I think that's I haven't moved on to new forms of art or anything like that. Like, I still like what I like.
Yeah.
But it was just how I kind of seeing why I was drawn to things all my life now that has stood out since then.
Well, Chris, I'm super grateful to you for taking the time to talk to me about these unusual and life-altering experiences that you've had. I hope that this was an interesting chat for you as well, because, we didn't just talk about your band. We did talk about your band, but it's a little different. Break you out of your interview mold, if you will. Do you know what I mean?
Totally. And I appreciate the opportunity to give it a try. Like I say, it's a really difficult thing to talk about at the best of times because it just seems so wacky.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate you giving me a chance to talk about it.
Where can people find you? I know you have a couple projects in the works. Go ahead and promote where people can find you and what you're doing right now.
Well, like I said, I'm in the band Propagandy. currently with the pandemic happening. There's not too much happening as far as new music or shows, obviously, but that's our main project. And I also have this Patreon project, which I can't remember what the URL is because I'm such a professional. But I do a Patreon called A Catastrophic Break with Consensus Reality. That is a series of podcasts and sometimes music. That where I try to look back on what we've done in Propagandy and answer people's questions about it.
It's awesome, and I'm a patron. I love the Patreon page that you have. It's such a fantastic little community, which I think is what you're cultivating over there. I feel like it's a very personalized approach to people who care a lot about what you've done over the past, several years, many years, and so yeah. I think that what I'll do is I'll also put a link to the Patreon in the show notes, so anybody who's listening right now can find the link directly to Chris's Patreon page where he has the Duplicate Keys Icaro podcast episode, and also the transcript is available over there for patrons, obviously. And also the song Duplicate Keys Icaro is the closing track on the 2012 Propagandy Failed States LP, which came out on Epitaph Records. So you can find that everywhere you get music. But Chris, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure for me to chat with you for a little bit and talking about this piece of work that you've done. It's really just a delight.
Well, thank you, Greg. I'm glad we were finally able to do it.
Unscripted Moments, a podcast about Propagandy, is created, hosted, and produced by Keith Goff and Greg Soden. Musical clips on this show are composed and performed by Propagandy. Artwork on the show is by Justin Santora, who can be reached at justinsantora.com. You can find us on Twitter at PropagandyPod and on Instagram at PropagandyPod. If you like the show, please drop a rating on your podcast app of choice and subscribe to receive future episodes. Tell your friends. Thank you so much for listening.
The rolling hills, the water flows, the flowers bloom. There is no me, there is no you.